Across 2,000 years, from flaming birds to silent drones, the battlefield has changed. But the spirit of innovation has never wavered. Some fought with walls, some with whispers, some with machines no bigger than a man's hand. Today, we journey through some of the most impressive moments where genius turned the tide of war. Julius Caesar, trapped deep in Gaul, faced annihilation. The Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix held up inside Alesia, while a massive Gallic relief army marched to crush the Romans from behind. Any general would retreat. But Caesar ordered the unimaginable: 2 walls. One facing inward to besiege the city, another facing outward to resist the incoming army. Ditches, wooden spikes, deadly traps stretched across more than 30 kilometers of brutal landscape. When the Gauls attacked from inside and out, they smashed helplessly against the Roman lines. But while Caesar mastered fear through walls and iron, another mind would one day win battles using nothing but silence and a single haunting song. In 228 AD, the brilliant Chinese strategist Zhuge Liang faced an impossible situation. His city lay defenseless, with enemy forces rapidly approaching. Conventional wisdom said to close the gates and brace for siege. But Zhuge Liang did the opposite. He threw open the gates, had a handful of soldiers casually sweep the streets, and sat atop the walls playing a calm, haunting tune on his zither. The approaching army, seeing the open gates and eerie calm, froze in terror, convinced it was an ambush. Without a single drop of blood spilled, the enemy fled. It wasn't force that won the day. It was pure psychological mastery. But sometimes, when deception wasn't enough, ancient warriors turned to fire itself to break their enemies. In the brutal age of Viking conquest, when walls grew taller and defenses stronger, Harold the Ruthless found a terrifying answer. Siege engines could be crushed, armies could be beaten back. But what if the city itself turned against its defenders? His warriors captured local birds, nesting inside enemy walls, tied burning embers to their legs, and released them into the air. The desperate animals flew straight back to their homes, tucked inside the wooden rafters and thatched roofs of the city. Within minutes, flames erupted from within, sowing chaos behind the very walls meant to protect them. Harold didn't batter the city into submission. He let terror and fire do the work for him. But while fire could tear down cities, there would come a day when courage alone would turn the tides of an entire ocean. In 1597, Korea faced total annihilation. The Japanese Navy, over 300 ships strong, advanced to crush the last Korean resistance. Admiral Yi Sun-sin stood against them, with only 13 battered warships under his command. But he chose his battlefield carefully. The narrow Myeongyang Strait, where violent currents churned unpredictably. Yi positioned his tiny fleet where the waters raged strongest, forcing the massive enemy armada into chaos. Enemy ships collided, turned, and became easy prey. Yi's cannons tore through the confusion, sinking dozens of ships without losing a single vessel of his own. Through sheer brilliance and unbreakable spirit, Admiral Yi turned certain defeat into one of the most stunning naval victories in history. But sometimes, even the strongest fleets could be shattered, not by fire or courage, but by a single invisible mistake. In June 1942, the Pacific hung in the balance. Japan, victorious after Pearl Harbor, moved to seize Midway Island and crush U.S. naval power for good. But American codebreakers had cracked parts of the Japanese communications. They knew the attack was coming. Instead of defending passively, the U.S. launched an ambush. As the Japanese carriers prepared their aircraft for a second strike, American dive bombers, arriving at the perfect moment, rained fire from the sky. In minutes, 3 of Japan's frontline carriers were ablaze. What began as a trap for the Americans ended with the Japanese fleet crippled beyond repair. Intelligence, timing, and raw nerve transformed Midway into one of the greatest turning points in naval history. But even when battles were won with intelligence, sometimes victory demanded secrecy on a scale the world had never seen before. In the shadows of World War II, a silent war raged. One fought with mathematics, machines, and minds. The German military relied on the Enigma machine, a device so complex they believed its coded messages were unbreakable. But at Bletchley Park, a secret team led by Alan Turing and other brilliant cryptanalysts took on the impossible. Day and night, they battled the shifting codes, building primitive computers to crack the daily encryptions before they expired. Their success, codenamed Ultra, gave the Allies priceless information. Enemy movements, planned attacks, secret strategies. Entire battles, entire invasions turned on their invisible victories. Some historians say that breaking Enigma shortened the war by at least 2 years. But even as hidden mines turned the tide, the skies above Europe would soon be haunted by shadows far more tangible. In the dead of night over the Eastern Front, German soldiers spoke of ghosts, invisible bombers that whispered through the sky. But they weren't phantoms. They were the Night Witches, Soviet women pilots flying ancient, near-silent biplanes. Without radios, without parachutes, they soared low under radar, idled their engines before reaching the target, and released their bombs in near-total silence. A single distant whoosh of fabric in the dark was all the warning German troops received before explosions tore through their camps. They flew up to 8 missions a night, facing anti-aircraft fire with almost no protection. Their courage turned fragile wooden planes into instruments of terror, a living nightmare that haunted German forces until the end of the war. But while some relied on the cover of night, others crafted entire armies that existed only in the mind. In 1944, as Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe, they knew one truth: surprise would mean survival. So they created an army that didn't exist. Operation Fortitude deployed fake tanks made of rubber, inflatable trucks, phony radio signals, and a blizzard of false intelligence. Actors and double agents fed Hitler a carefully woven lie: that the main invasion would land at Pas de Calais, not Normandy. Even after the real D-Day landings began, German high command hesitated, believing the true assault was still coming elsewhere. Weeks of confusion allowed the Allies to establish their beachheads and advance inland. Fortitude wasn't a battle of weapons. It was a battle of belief, where illusion defeated an empire. But not all weapons of deception stayed on the ground. Some were meant to strike from the skies in the most unexpected ways. In the heart of World War II, desperation and imagination collided. American psychologist B.F. Skinner proposed a radical idea: train pigeons to guide bombs to their targets. In Project Pigeon, birds were placed inside specially designed bomb noses, pecking at a screen, showing a moving image of the target below. Their pecks corrected the bomb's flight path in real time, a living guidance system. Skinner's pigeons performed remarkably well in tests, showing precision and adaptability no machine could match at the time. Yet despite their success, the military shelved the project. Radar and electronic guidance systems were evolving too fast. Project Pigeon became a forgotten monument to human creativity in war. Proof that when technology lags, nature sometimes fills the gap. But as nature and science fought for dominance, steel and fire would once again decide the fate of fortresses. In 1940, Belgium's fortress Eben Emael was considered invincible, a massive underground stronghold guarding key bridges into France. But Germany's plan wasn't to attack with brute force. Instead, in the dead of night, they unleashed a new weapon: silent gliders. Elite paratroopers landed directly atop the fortress before the defenders could even react. Armed with hollow charges, early-shaped explosives, they blasted through steel turrets and bunkers with surgical precision. Within hours, a fortress meant to resist an army had fallen to fewer than 100 men. Eben Emael didn't collapse from siege or bombardment. It collapsed from speed, surprise, and the perfect weapon at the perfect time. But while fortresses fell quickly, some wars would be fought slowly. where the true enemy was not armies, but hunger itself. At the outbreak of World War II, Germany knew it couldn't defeat Britain with armies alone, so they turned to a ruthless numbers game, the tonnage strategy. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, targeting merchant ships carrying food, fuel, and weapons. It wasn't about sinking warships. It was about sinking enough tonnage each month to starve Britain into collapse. Convoys burned, supplies dwindled, rations tightened. For years, Britain lived under constant siege by an invisible enemy lurking beneath the waves. Victory wouldn't come from a single battle, but from slow, relentless attrition. In the cold depths of the Atlantic, mathematics became a weapon, and survival became a race against numbers. But while submarines waged silent war at sea, another battle raged in the skies, where invisible beams could guide bombers or send them to their doom. In the early days of the Blitz, German bombers found their targets not with sight, but with soundless, invisible radio beams. Crossing signals from different locations, German crews could triangulate their exact position, even in the dead of night. Britain's survival depended on breaking this secret. Using intelligence and daring innovation, British engineers jammed, distorted, and bent the beams, sending bombers off course into empty fields or the sea. What was meant to be surgical destruction turned into random chaos. It was one of history's first battles fought not with guns or tanks, but with invisible currents in the air, the dawn of electronic warfare. But even as technology reshaped the battlefield, one final race would be fought. Not for land or cities, but for the minds that could rule the future. When the guns fell silent in 1945, a new war began. A race not for territory, but for minds. Operation Paperclip was the US government's secret mission to capture and relocate over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians. Men who had built the V-2 rockets that terrorized London were now building missiles for America. Men who had once served the Nazi war machine would soon design the rockets that carried astronauts to the moon. Ethical lines blurred. Files were altered. Histories were hidden. In the scramble for technological supremacy, morality became a secondary concern. Victory would no longer come from sheer firepower, but from whoever controlled the secrets of the future. But as rockets pointed toward the stars, battles on Earth were still won, sometimes in mere hours, with the skies burning overhead. On the morning of June 5th, 1967, before the world even woke up, Israel launched one of the most devastating preemptive strikes in history. Operation Focus was simple in theory. Destroy the enemy's air forces before they ever left the ground. Israeli pilots flew low under radar detection, then rose suddenly over enemy air bases, releasing precision bombs that turned 400 aircrafts into firestorms. In just a few hours, Israel wiped out the air power of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, gaining uncontested control of the skies. Without air cover, the ground war collapsed in days. It wasn't superior numbers that won. It was speed, timing, and ruthless precision. But while professional armies reshaped nations, the future of warfare was already being crafted. In 2022, as Russian tanks rolled across Ukrainian borders, a new kind of resistance emerged, not from armies, but from civilians wielding everyday technology. Off-the-shelf drones, the kind used for filming weddings or farming fields, were repurposed into weapons of war. Ukrainians attached grenades, bombs, and cameras to small commercial drones, turning $500 machines into deadly precision strike tools. They hunted tanks, corrected artillery, and terrorized enemy trenches with silent death from above. The battlefield was no longer reserved for billion-dollar machines. It was open to anyone with a backpack and a transmitter. In Ukraine, the age of civilian-led drone warfare wasn't just born. It exploded. And And so, from ancient firebirds to backyard drones, one truth remains. The nature of war may evolve, but the power of human ingenuity never fades. The greatest weapon is the mind behind the strategy, and the next revolution may already be flying, invisible, just above our heads. Want to see more stories? Subscribe to our channel.